Okay, everybody, we have reached the bottom of the hour, so let's get going with today's L10 webinar, 5 quick wins to better bond your team. Okay, let me tell you about our speaker today, Lola Gershfeld. Lola is the founder of EMC Leaders, and she's an organizational psychologist and a board and team dynamic specialist. She's the developer of a groundbreaking and empirically supported approach, the emotional connection process, or EMC. Dr. Gershfeld is also the author of several books, including Emotional Connection and excuse me, the Connected Culture. We're going to connect you, by the way, with some of those books today. Everybody who's here today is going to get a digital copy of the new book, and we're also going to have a drawing after the webinar to give 5 of you a copy of the other book, Emotional Connection. So please stay tuned for that, and we will be notifying winners of that drawing. And Lola will tell you more about how you can get a copy of the book. All right. So with all that said, let me go ahead and turn things over to Lola to take it away from here. Lola, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. You being here is really important to me, and it's a really gift for me. I think you being here shows how much you care about your teams, your organizations, about your relationships at work, and about your role. Today, I will be sharing with you a little bit of a research data in the background, what led me to design this emotional connection process. So, as I share, I invite you to think about your experience in the workplace with your teams, with your people that you're working with. Personally, working as an HR manager, as a CFO, and even a board member, I remember it was really, really hard to create and maintain this cohesiveness in my team or on our board. I experienced an array of issues. For example, people getting angry and demanding, to complaining and blaming, to those who would shut down and not talk, and of course everything in between. And so the interesting part was, with all my empathic listening, things would just calm down for a little while, but then the pattern would come back and repeat itself, and maybe at a slightly higher intensity, until it would just erupt into a full-blown conflict. And in those moments, I felt completely helpless and stuck what to do. So for the last 13 years, I really devoted my time researching what makes teams work cohesively together and how do we move them forward? How do we get them unstuck? And so during that period of time, I was specifically drawn to the model of attachment theory and the science of emotions. So as Tim mentioned, I developed the emotional connection process, or EMC, and applied it to over 800 cases, helping teams and companies reduce workplace conflict, improve their dynamics, and increase employee engagement. And what occurred to me working with all these companies and teams is that people don't have the right tools to address the issues and get to the heart of the problem. So what was really surprising to me also to learn is that 85% of employees deal with workplace conflict. And really, I think it's 100% because many times managers don't see the hidden conflict that is going on in the team relationships. I remember working with a company where members of the leadership team would attend meetings and be completely disengaged, not say one word at the meeting. So the CEO knew that there's something was going on, but she didn't realize that it was a sign of a hidden conflict. So there are two most common sources of conflict: relational and organizational. Relational conflicts arise among employees with different personalities, communication styles, or value systems. And research shows that 56% of surveyed employees deal with relational conflicts. Organizational conflicts arise from its policies, procedures, and the way they are being communicated to the employees. So things like allocation of resources or promotions or even office space can really create a sense of preferential treatment for others when people don't know how to communicate in a way that keeps the relationship safe. And so you start noticing quiet quitting or presentism, where people show up to work and are just unmotivated to give their 100% effort. And I believe that people want to come to work with and give the 100%. So as you can imagine, the company suffers and the employees. And I see managers spend hours and hours after work talking to people, trying to engage them, and really feeling exhausted and drained from all of this happening. So what I learned in my work and in my research is that the root cause of workplace conflict is not the conflict itself. It's not the content that people trying to figure out. The root cause of workplace conflict is emotional disconnection that is happening for people. So in simple terms, human beings are social bonding creatures. That's who we are. We are wired that way. We are wired to bond with other people, especially with people we depend on. And we depend on people at work. So our brain automatically seeks the bonding and emotional connection with people we work with. And so we require that connection for us to survive and thrive. Because we are relational beings, connection for us is like oxygen. It's like water for fish. I mean, have you seen how the fish acts when you take it out of the water, right? It goes all weird. The same thing for human beings. For us, connection is our bonding water for us. So recent research shows that when we lose that connection, it triggers the brain into a type of panic mode called a separation distress. That leads some people, so you have like a half of people behave in a more anxious way, which means they start complaining, blaming, judging, maybe criticizing, lecturing, demanding. So if you see any of those behaviors happen on your team, you know they are telling you, I'm disconnected. I'm in this separation distress. I'm in panic mode. My brain is in panic mode. And half of people, they have learned how to deal with this disconnection and stress by being avoidant. So they disengage, they shut down, they withdraw, they avoid, they become busy. So both of these behaviors demonstrate to you that there is an emotional disconnection. And so these behaviors actually trigger what we call a negative cycle, where one person starts pushing for connection, being more pursuer, more anxious, and the other starts to withdraw, being more avoidant and withdrawn. So the more anxious one gets, the more avoidant the other becomes. The more avoidant one becomes, the more anxious the other gets. And so they sort of get stuck in this terrible negative cycle, and then the cycle takes over the relationship, which leaves people alone and exhausted. And now you have low productivity, you have disengagement, you have risk aversion, you have people lack motivation and performance. And people start to experience in those moments hopelessness and helplessness, just like what I experienced in my board meetings. Hopelessness and helplessness, and in my teams that I try to create more cohesion. And you start hearing things like, I can't work with this person, or this person is being difficult, and they don't have any skills, this person has a personality disorder. Or the other people say, oh, this person is so demanding and aggressive. So when we work with a team, now looking and using this new lens of this new science and looking at the team relationship through the attachment lens, is what we say is that you guys are in a terrible attachment panic and you don't know how to deal with it. So you get angry, which pushes people away, or you shut down and withdraw, which also pushes people away. And so for many years, I've been talking about the fact that workplace conflicts live in content and continues to escalate when people become anxious, or avoidant. And if you tell people like stop blaming or stop doing things, I see this all the time. Personal improvement plans, very common. Well, the problem is they will kind of like shut their emotions for a while, but then when vulnerability hits, guess what? That particular response comes back in more strong with intensity, and it gets and people get more aggressive. Or the other extreme is people shut down and don't talk for days or weeks. So working with teams and integrating the EMC process, what I have seen is that when we provide a safe pathway for people to share their emotions, to provide teams with this roadmap for reconnection and catch the disconnection in the moments when they occur early in their relationship and early in time when they're stressed, they start to become more engaged. They become softer. The anxious people become softer in their approach, and the avoidant people stay in the conversation and don't walk away anymore. And more importantly, they start to have a much more secure relationship where they start to trust each other more, reach for each other, and create a strong bond in their relationship. So the more secure relationship you have, the lesser workplace conflict you will have. It's that really simple. It's amazing how simple it is. It's hard to do though, because emotions are very powerful, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So recently we conducted a research study to examine the relationship between anxious and avoidant and workplace conflicts with 143 participants. It was online. We had 88 males and 55 females between the ages of 25 to 64, working full-time in the United States. What this graph shows is that the higher the avoidance level and the higher the anxiety level, the higher the workplace conflict. Basically, AA for anxious and avoidant is a statistically significant predictor of workplace conflicts. So this helps us to show that the more you connect with your team emotionally, the less anxious and avoidant they will be, and the less workplace conflicts you will have. And I think this is the reason why there's such a high rate of workplace conflicts in companies, is because they're not addressing the root cause, which is the disconnection. They're addressing just the symptom, the behavior. So the first step in paving a path to better team bonding for you is to recognize that when emotional disconnection happens, this is what causes the conflicts. Or the other way around, when you have conflicts, it's about because people are emotionally disconnected. So I'm going to share with you in a very short period of time. I can't give you all the solutions, but here are just 5 things you can do to help your team to increase that connection and reduce the chances for workplace conflict. So the first one is make space for emotions. Emotion comes from the Latin word emovere, means to move. So emotion moves us to action, but it's very fast. And it's supposed to be fast because it's supposed to save our lives. But emotion is kind of like an alarm system for you. It's activated when we get triggered, when we feel that rejection. And so there's a change in our relationship. That's when the emotion starts to activate us to do something. So one of the things we're starting to understand is that underneath every problem, what you end up finding is frightening, alien, and unacceptable emotion. Frightening, alien, and unacceptable emotion. The word that always strikes me is alien, strange. So for many of us, emotions are kind of unknown territory that we distrust or avoid talking about it. And often we don't know how to share our emotions. We get more frustrated and disappointed by our inability to communicate clearly. So by learning how to hold space for emotions, we start to help ourselves and others to figure out what these emotions we feel, especially our softer feelings. And science has really made it easy for us because deep down, we usually deal with just 3 kinds of softer feelings. Just 3: sadness, shame, or fear. Fear of being rejected and abandoned in our relationship. So when we can remember these 3 emotions and piece them together by asking 4 simple questions that we can ask ourselves. What's the trigger here? When did this feeling begin? What's the body sensation that I feel? What does my mind decides is going to happen now? And what urge takes over me? What do I want to do? What is the action impulse do I have when I feel that way? We start to make sense of our emotions, and this puts the ground under our feet. It really calms our brain down. It calms our nervous system down. And it allows us to be more open and responsive with each other in our teams. So we say, of course you feel that way. You don't persuade people not to feel the way they do. You go and join them in their experience. You just stay there. You don't provide any suggestion. This is really hard for managers to do, right? Because when the direct report or a teammate comes and they tell you the problem, look, your emotions start to be activated. So you need to learn how to hold that space for people. You use soft tone, you slow pace, you slow things down. I remember working with this team, and the executive leader who had, she claimed to have very high emotional intelligence, but she had no idea how her stress was causing her team to be all worried about it. Like her tone of voice was always high when she talked, or her speed of speech was fast without any stopping. So all of that overwhelms the other person. Even with her high IQ, she did not know how to hold that space for people. When going through the process, she learned how to slow things down. She started to connect with her team at a deeper level and recognize the impact she had on them and they on her. By holding the space for emotions, you start to experience calmness, which allows your team to solve problems more effectively and work cohesively together. In a way, you become what we call in the EMC process, we call ARE. You are accessible, responsive, and engaged. All emotional variables. You are emotionally accessible, you're emotionally responsive, and you are more emotionally engaged. Number 2, try offering impact versus feedback. So we've been all taught to provide feedback, right? Things that we need to improve, which works great if you have a secure relationship with your team, if you have a secure this attachment. However, if you don't, if you have not had a chance to really create a relationship that is a strong bond, feedback becomes a threat. It is perceived as criticism. So by sharing impact versus feedback, what you're starting to do, you're starting to open space for vulnerability, and you start to help people pull them closer to you. So think of impact as awareness focus, where feedback as content focus. For example, I worked with a division of about 15 bank branches, and the VP of this division was very frustrated and felt helpless as half of his managers would not follow a certain procedures. And every Friday he would come and he would ask them, and they would always have an excuse. Working with him and his team, he started to share the impact it had on him when his managers didn't follow the procedure. He shared how he would wake up in the middle of the night and thinking about it and have this perpetual to-do list, and how it impacted his confidence as a manager, and how he started to doubt himself that he wasn't an effective manager. And as you can imagine, when he was sharing that, all eyes were on him. After the meeting, one by one, every manager came and said how grateful they were for sharing this experience with them. They had no idea the impact it had on him. He didn't blame. He didn't judge. He was focused on sharing his internal experience for him. 3 months later, he called me. He said, Lola, you wouldn't believe it. I have not had to remind any of my managers to follow the procedure. He couldn't believe it himself, the difference it made for him and his team. So sharing impact takes practice because you have to be in tune with your own experience. You have to be really practicing this attunement. It's like listening to music when you dance. When you do that, you start to create this new corrective emotional experience with your team, where they start to make changes without you actually telling them to change. And they do it on their own because they care about you. They want to be connected with you. So number 3, set the stage for safe conversations. So what we see in successful teams is that they start to get a sense when they are scaring each other. They start to be able to slow down and tune into what is happening in each other's faces. So they can slow it down, step out of the negative pattern sooner. So one of the skills you learn in the EMC process, it's called bonding conversations. You start to shift your focus from being caught up in their emotions to a broader perspective of being caught in the negative cycle. Stop saying things like, you're never available to talk to me, right? To saying things like, hey, I feel alone and pressured with this project. So tuning into the internal experience again stops the blame game. Here's what it sounds like when it works. Anna says, wait a minute. We are getting into one of those things again. We are getting into one of those spirals that we talked about in our training. I was just trying to reach out to you, but I think maybe I started down the wrong path. Maybe I'm not doing it right. Maybe you heard criticism. I didn't want it to come out like that. Can we start that over? Can we try it again? Because I really want to talk with you right now. See, that is an invitation to emotional safety. That is an invitation to emotional balance so that you can move in the same direction together. I often say that interaction is like a dance and emotion is the music of the dance. When you tune into the same music, you move in the same direction. Number 4, and this is one of my favorite, validate emotional experience. I think the most useful way to think about this is that when you validate someone's emotional experience, you are helping them to expand their sense of self. You are accepting their experience. You don't have to agree with the facts. That's not what you're doing. You are expecting this is how they feel. And you're also reassuring them that they are not alone in that experience. And that is very powerful for people. So one of the things that Carl Rogers said that is that the essence of health is for people to feel competent and worthy. The essence of health is for people to feel competent and worthy, where they feel competent and worthy with their own experience. And if you're worthy, if you feel valued, if you feel competent, you are engaging with others. And research says that validation creates this special kind of emotional presence. Emotional presence that is what really creates a lasting bond. So hear how it sounds. I can hear how difficult this is for you right now. I may not see the facts as you see them, but I want you to know I'm here for you because you are important to me. So that type of emotional reassurance really helps people to feel that they are not alone, that you accept them, and their sense of self becomes more stronger. Number 5, make the most of your weekly check-ins. So Burton Lanfield, the father of system theory, said that if you want to change a living system, relationship is a living system because it changes all the time. So if you want to change a living system, you have to go in and change the variables that organize the system. Now, there are a lot of variables you can change, but based on what Carl Rogers and John Bowlby believed is that it's overwhelming emotion that colors and orders and organizes our inner world and structures our outer world. So by including time to talk about emotions on a weekly basis, making space for emotions where people can share their vulnerabilities and respond to them with validation and acceptance, you start to create that strong bond. And one of the wonderful things about using EMC with your team is that you start to watch how team members grow each other. Because what you're really doing is you are starting to create an essential ecological niche where their their sense of self can develop naturally. And that's the amazing thing about attachment is that it really gives us a map for that to take place. So our self-growth into health, and that helps us to engage and work cohesively together. I think to me, it's amazing. I listened last week to an interview of Joseph Jaworski, author of The Heart of Synchronicity. And the interviewer asked him one question: what should leaders do more of? What should leaders do more of? And his answer was love. Leaders should do more of love. They should love their people. They should love their team members. Well, how can leaders love more if they don't know how to connect with each other emotionally? They can't. So these weekly check-ins really help you to set the stage to create stronger bonds and safer conversations. So when a vulnerability hits, your teams can deal with it in the most effective way possible. In my book, The Connected Culture, you will find a lot of examples how to do all of these 5 quick teams and quick wins and practice them. Please reach out to me. I think you did fantastic being here with me, listening to this. I love the topic of emotional connection. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Lola, thank you so much. We're seeing a lot of thank yous and great program and great content, insights, comments coming in. So everybody, thank you for sharing. And Lola, thank you for sharing with us as well today.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.